Hi there, and welcome to Season 3 of the Humans and AI podcast. In this podcast, we dive into the real-life stories of the top leaders and entrepreneurs within the artificial intelligence, high-performance computing and data center space. These people truly are at the top of their game. We've got honest and authentic conversations with our guests. We're going to chat about their career journeys, the highs and the lows, and even the lessons they've learned from their mistakes, and the victories they've celebrated along the way. It's all about sharing their experience and knowledge. We talk about the company they're currently in and how they see the future of the space. So if you're looking for practical advice from people who have walked the same path, or just a little inspiration, you're in the right place. We're going to be releasing new episodes on Thursday at 12, so make sure you stay tuned. Hey Ryan, great to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Nick. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Look, we've been talking for a little while now, so it's great to get you finally on the show. For the benefit of people listening and watching, do you mind just doing a quick helicopter view of who you are, company you're working for, and the role you're doing?
Yeah. So I'm Ryan Pollock. I lead product marketing at an AI cloud infrastructure company called Together AI. I live in San Francisco. You can see from my background. And been living here 20 plus years, working at a number of Bay Area companies as well as a couple other cloud infrastructure companies that have been more East Coast based. Been at Google, at Oracle, DigitalOcean, Vulture, and now Together AI, and certainly have a fairly strong opinion as to why this sort of AI NeoCloud space has emerged, and in general how some of these independent cloud players have managed to carve out their own unique place in this very competitive industry. So happy to speak on all those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as you say, you've worked for some of the hyperscalers, massive enterprise organizations, let's say Google, Oracle, and then you've worked for some of the more emerging sort of NeoClouds and startups like your Vultures, like your DigitalOceans, and obviously Together AI. I suppose, are there any major sort of fundamental differences with, working in an industry that is pretty competitive, exciting nonetheless as well?
Yeah. I mean, and my perspective, it's certainly informed by my time at Google and that subsequent journey, and just some of the things I noticed when I was at Google in like 2014, 2015. I saw an opportunity in the market for cloud infrastructure to be simpler than Amazon was making, and I'd advocated for some of that at Google. Wound up at DigitalOcean a couple of years later, a company that was very much rooted in that. Vulture is sort of a continuation, and now at Together AI, making AI infrastructure a lot easier to use and more accessible and developer friendly. So I've continued to see that sort of opportunity throughout my journey. And now with AI, it's even more than that. It's a completely different stack from the data center, from the ground, literally, all the way up through software and API layer. So there have just been a number of different sort of vectors of competing and of innovation and of differentiation. And I think we're seeing this AI NeoCloud category now emerging, kind of as a result of all of these different factors.
I mean, that's it. I mean, the NeoCloud, it was a term that I didn't even know of until middle of last year. I mean, I've been working with all these companies, but we kind of sort of, somebody fashioned a name and it just appeared.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what would you say the biggest sort of differentiator from a NeoCloud to a more traditional cloud provider or even a hyperscaler? Because there is a difference, but we don't really talk about it.
Yeah, and I sort of chuckle at the term at this point. I guess certainly in this conversation I'm using it as it's become, I think fairly well understood among those of us in the space. But I think certainly what it refers to is a cloud at this point, the AI NeoCloud, an entire service that is purpose built for these new kinds of AI workloads. And it is honestly, it's very much common sense that, you can look at the typical hyperscalers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they were all built like those infrastructure platforms. And of course I was at Google for 9 years. Those were all built to power CPU based services. Amazon to power the world's largest e-commerce site, Google the largest search engine. So the reasons for those platforms existing were for those kinds of services, which were all basically CPU based. And now with this AI NeoCloud concept, the obviously we've all seen what's happened in the aftermath of ChatGPT, and these sorts of models, creating them, running them, they're just so fundamentally different than the workloads that typical hyperscalers have usually served. So as I said, everything from the data center to the hardware to the software to the services layer, completely different now than everything before.
And I think, thinking from a marketing and a product marketing sort of standpoint, you like you say you worked 9 years at Google. You're now working in the more challenger environments.
Yeah.
Is it a different job working in the marketing function
Oh,
of,
yeah.
of a company like Together AI versus a Google? I mean, I'd assume it is, but what are the
Yeah, yeah.
biggest sort of differences and challenges from your point of view?
Yeah, it is extremely different, even if the technology, obviously the traditional clouds are all intent on competing here, doing their best. But yes, it's a very different day to day, very different, sort of feel to the role. You know, it, and Google, I think, is probably a little bit different than maybe an Amazon or a Microsoft. Google, I would honestly say, was more startup-y, certainly in my time there. But at Google, 9 years there, like everybody on the planet knew Google. I didn't have that problem. The problem that I say, encountered more often than not at Google was like just trying to keep the company, from harming itself, from doing foolish things, and just trying to advocate to do things that made sense. That was unfortunately, a lot of my experience there. But at Together AI and at some of the other cloud providers, DigitalOcean, Vultr, that I had been at prior, the work is certainly more challenging, more fulfilling, because not everybody on the planet knows these companies. You have to work for it. You have to earn developer love. You have to build a community. You have to have a product that is really compelling. You can't just put something out there and link to it from some other product and count on getting people to it. So it's obviously much more of a kind of startup scale up situation, and you know everything from brand fundamentals to messaging positioning. What are the tactics? You have to do a lot more at one of these smaller companies than the big guys.
And so obviously thinking of Together AI and some of the smaller organisations that you work for, and they're not tiny by any stretch, right? But as you say, everybody on the planet knows Google,
Yeah.
and that has its own disadvantages, as you suggest. But what are the fundamental things that you have to do to create that sort of brand recognition and brand awareness for a company like Together AI? That's the first and foremost.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, it starts with having a good company name, and some meaning behind that. And at Together AI, that name was chosen. I don't actually know who conceived it, but it's a good name,
It sells.
and the message to that, if it's not obvious, is that it's our belief that AI should not be built by one company. It should be built by community with a lot of that ideally being open source and having transparency. So anyway, from starting with that sort of company name and brand message, to just all the marketing fundamentals, having a solid website, having social media presence. Some of these things were, at least first iterations were certainly built before I got to the company, and I've continued on, and there's still a lot more work to do, in all honesty. But yeah, having those fundamental attributes, those presences, shipping quality product, and our company Together AI, we certainly have multiple product lines. One of them being basically an inference and fine-tuning platform for open source models, and another kind of category that we compete in being more of GPU infrastructure or GPU as a service. So as a product person, as someone who started my career as an engineer, I believe very much that like your business is dead if you don't have a good product. So I'm fortunate now to work with a really great engineering, research, and product team. But yeah, just in general with all of this, the layer cake, if you will, of building a business from the brand to messaging to product and everything above that. What are the tactics you do on the go-to-market side, driving adoption, whether that's more product-led growth or sales-led growth. We do kind of all of those different kinds of motions at Together AI. So anyhow, obviously a lot goes into it.
And obviously, being an AI company, do you use much AI yourself actually within the function of the marketing team?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I admittedly use a number of different services. Some of our own, some more the consumer apps. I would say from companies that I would consider competitors. And I use. I mean, I will also mention like we fairly recently introduced Together Chat. If you haven't previously checked out chat.together.ai, I would encourage you to take a look at that. It's quickly become a very compelling, more consumer application that allows you as a end user to interact with some of the DeepSeek models and Llama models and Flux and image generation and modification model out of Black Forest Labs. But yes, I use AI constantly now. I feel like I rarely do anything without it. I occasionally use it at the dinner table and as a fifth participant in dinner conversations with my wife and kids, much to my wife's chagrin sometimes.
I don't think you're alone in that, to be fair.
But yeah, I at this point I very much feel like if I'm Paul McCartney, AI is my thousand John Lennons,
Yep. Okay.
and I am not going to restrain myself from relying on that unless there's some really unique circumstance in which I really don't.
I mean, there's obviously there's some great tech out there, and I will ask you more about any particular
Hmm.
recommendations later because at the end of the day, it
Sure.
really can help.
Yeah.
A marketing function, particularly in a
Yeah.
startup, maybe with
Absolutely.
limited budgets and stuff like that. But I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean,
No, I'm good.
offline, we spoke about AI sort of triggering a bit of a big sort of reset.
Hmm.
Particularly sort of within the cloud infrastructure space. Are you able to just sort of expand on that?
Yeah, and that's a phrase I like to use just to make clear how different this new AI infrastructure is than everything that came before, and just sort of the magnitude of the change. Like if I'm talking to an enterprise and trying to help them understand like, well, why is it that they shouldn't just use AWS? That notion of a big reset is something I like to say. Look, everything you think you know just got thrown out the window. And as I said, like admittedly, like these legacy as I oftentimes call them, the legacy cloud players, they're not blind to this. Everybody is investing. Certainly Amazon has their Trainium and Inferentia processors that are effectively an alternative to NVIDIA. Google has their tensor processing units. Everybody in the space is well aware of the need to innovate and deliver here, and there's different choices being made. I think that some of these AI NeoClouds, Together AI, among them certainly, it's our point of view that right now, NVIDIA still has like a very serious advantage, technically in terms of you know training, especially it's most obvious still. Inference infrastructure for these new reasoning models, again, like we think that NVIDIA is still like the best option out there. Um, Whereas you see some of those legacy clouds like pushing their own stacks more and more. Um, so anyway, the big reset is just to say any business, any developer that's looking to actually build and run AI, they've got to use something that is genuinely made for this, for where these model architectures are, not just where they are, but where they're going. And you cannot simply just stick with the status quo of vendors and so on.
Absolutely. And I think, going on around sort of go-to-market strategies, then, particularly for sort of AI NeoClouds, it's an emerging market. There's a fair old few sort of NeoClouds that are popping up all the time. There's some obviously more established, and they have got to sort of, get the consumer and the end clients to look away from the norm, what is safe, going to your point about AWS and stuff like that. So it's a comfortable consideration. But at the same time, that's the first hurdle. Are there any sort of typical mistakes that you're seeing from these AI NeoClouds, around their go-to-market strategy? Are there sort of common sort of mistakes that you're seeing sort of coming up?
Um, Obviously, there have been many new companies incubated around this NeoCloud idea, and honestly, it's not, to me, it's not a new phenomenon. As the same thing effectively happened with CPU-based infrastructure, virtual private server companies. There have been hundreds or thousands of those over the years, um, and I think many, you know, like that's DigitalOcean's wheelhouse still. That's Vultre's wheelhouse still, and I think there's a little bit of a tendency for some of these new AI NeoCloud GPU cloud companies to think it's the same as sort of what it was, and that, oh, anybody can enter this space. Reality, not it's not like that. Not quite. And sure, while it all starts from like NVIDIA's infrastructure, and a B200 is a B200, regardless of where you get it. The reality is, like, to actually run these systems, and for a customer to make like genuine good use of it, not at all trivial. It's not just a matter of buying these things and plugging them in, and additionally, for cloud providers to actually be successful, and because GPU failure rates are quite high still. This is not the case of CPU. There's a huge gap in GPU kind of reliability and CPU reliability. So in general, for a GPU cloud to actually be proficient in operating these clusters, it's a real skill. There's a lot still that needs to be kind of manually done, or software that has to be built and operated. So it's, yeah, I think some GPU clouds sort of think it's, oh, I can just buy some NVIDIA and be done, and it's not like that. And I guess the last thing I'll add is that certainly for Together AI, many of our customers, like us, they use us because we're more actually than a cloud, typical cloud that you just get some infrastructure from. In a lot of cases, we work hand in hand, particularly with some of our mid to large size customers, oftentimes helping them create frontier class models, and that's something we bring to the table we have really some of the best in the industry, on the research and engineering side working for us. So just oftentimes what businesses really want, it's not infrastructure, it's a complete package of give me the underlying foundation and partner that I need to actually innovate in AI. And that's something that we bring that we honestly think no one else in the industry really has in the same way.
I mean, obviously, Together AI, great brand, great products, great services, and it's got that sort of reputation. I mean, from marketing to make a huge, positive impact in a business, yes, it helps that it's got a great product and a great service, but you've worked in a number of marketing
Hmm.
functions. Obviously, some I'm sure have been more successful than others ultimately in throughout your career. What do you think is required in those marketing teams to really make sure that marketing is set up for success?
I think there's a number of different components, and obviously I started earlier in talking about the brand and the company name and things like that.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think I care a lot about brand here because to the extent that even if the reality is it's not quite commodity, a lot of people see it that way, and therefore doing a level of brand marketing. We actually ran a campaign here, basically surrounding NVIDIA GTC a few months ago. We ran a campaign about AI pioneers building on Together AI. We had a nice out-of-home presence in San Francisco's Caltrain station, stretching down to San Jose, the train tracks, the 101 highway, and then surrounding the NVIDIA GTC event. So I think brand marketing and it still matters a lot. People need to know who you are, and I value that. And then otherwise, in terms of things that are critical on the marketing side, um, you know, for us, like we're launching things constantly. So just as we build a team here, we're continuing to do that, managing to keep up with basically the fire hose of new things coming out from our engineering team. We're shipping new model API endpoints and dedicated infrastructure for some of these new models. Feels it's on the average there's probably at least one a day. New things coming out, DeepSeek and Llama and all models from various partners that actually train models on our cloud, and then we also serve those models, providing inference APIs for a lot of things. Cartesia, and we were just doing something for LG the other day, brand new model nobody's ever heard of, basically. So there's new things, and we're constantly just like putting these announcements out. It's always on marketing to do that.
Yeah.
So that social media presence, event marketing, and participating in GTC, and we were at Dell World. We were doing the AI Engineer Fair here in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, which was honestly a great event. Love that.
There's an event every week, isn't there? It seems like,
Yeah, I mean, there's
whether it's in
more.
the
I
US or
mean,
in Europe.
it's
Yeah.
certainly this spring into summer season has been. I mean, we all know that multiple events going on every week. Last week, I regret I was not personally in Paris. We announced our European expansion. No, I was pushing that out. So just having a team capable of executing on all these different fronts right now, and we're still, we still need more people. we're all like, oh, is AI going to replace our jobs? And thankfully, this is part of why I work where I work on the things I do. Is like, well, there's a lot of work to just try to put in this new infrastructure. But yeah, for us to continue to build a team to cover all these different channels and compete in these different product categories that we're intensely competing in. We're part of the way there, but still feels like we need to keep on scaling on the personnel side.
And to be fair, I mean, with my next question, you may well have partly sort of answered it just there as well. But I think, with a lot of these sort of AI NeoClouds, there's a lot around their go-to-market strategy around attracting big enterprise customers and, going after large, partnerships and what have you. And you see some of them that they don't really think about the developers themselves, and don't really sort of think about those developers and really having them in mind at the forefront of actually what it is you're doing for them.
Yeah.
How are Together AI sort of approaching that?
Yeah, and I personally, I like to think I still have a huge amount of developer empathy. Having I studied computer science in college. I spent the first 2 years of my career as an engineer at Oracle, and realized, I want to do some things in addition to coding. So anyhow, for us, for our team, like obviously it's an engineering-led company. Some of the best researchers in the industry, and I therefore really try hard to make sure the work I'm doing is instilled with enough technical credibility. I'm in frequent collaboration with my researchers. They're building optimized kernels for the NVIDIA Blackwell platform, and they're coming to me with blog posts about things with admittedly somewhat fun names like Thunder Kittens. So anyway, I'm constantly work, working, collaborating with Stanford PhDs and so on, and making sure that for us we have that technical story that honestly has also been really instrumental putting out research, demonstrating we have unique technology to actually help help companies train and run models more efficiently. So having that sort of actual real innovation, our team putting out research papers and the like that in a lot of ways as a marketer, well, it kind of is content marketing. It's more than that in that it's like genuine deep innovation. But some of our research kind of blog posts get way more traffic than they would get way more traffic than like a case study, being
Hmm.
honest. So anyway, for us to have that technical credibility, the content, and then ultimately to provide access to that technical credibility and expertise to our customers, as certainly the ones that are spending millions of dollars on our GPU cloud, they're the ones that are pushing the frontier in every kind of modality right now. But yeah, the technical credibility, developer empathy, really it's oftentimes researcher level empathy. We try to make sure that's present in everything we do.
And yeah, I appreciate obviously writing papers, doing these all these
Yeah.
events, really getting in front of the people. I mean, thinking just sort of around building that traction, creating that brand recognition. How do you sort of measure the success in actually achieving those sort of goals? I mean, I appreciate
Yeah.
the CEO is probably thinking about the revenues and customer wins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But obviously that's further down the line. So how do you actually start measuring success and seeing that you're making ground in the marketplace?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll share my dual opinion on that. One of which is the obvious. Like we can put out a blog post from our research team and publicize it on social media, and of course we'll see what the reaction is. How many likes and how many visits and how many people ultimately get to, if it's a GitHub repository. We'll keep an eye on that. At the same time, like we're not, we're still lean enough that we're not always as disciplined about like fully tracking this stuff. But nonetheless, like we intrinsically know that research and innovation is so core to what it is that we're doing here that we're gonna back it in a lot of ways, like without even doing some of that sort of measurement. It is very much in this company's DNA. It's a core belief that research and innovation, certainly as it applies to AI cloud infrastructure for us, as that's our core business. We know that's critically important. And one other thing that I'll add that it's an analogy that I've recently started making. I spent some time. I had between Google and DigitalOcean. I was actually at Mozilla. So I've worked in the web browser space. Google, of course, the most popular browser on the planet with
Yeah.
Chrome. But I sort of feel right now that from an infrastructure perspective, AI infrastructure, maybe it's sort of like where Netscape was
Hmm.
in 2000 or whatever. That okay, we've got this first version of the platform here. It's it works. It does things. But you think about sort of how much the web browser has evolved from Netscape to now, and even if it sort of looks the same, the actual capabilities are just hugely, hugely different and superior now. I think we're probably going to see that level still of innovation just on the infrastructure, where everything's faster and more capable. Model architectures, and admittedly, I'm not an AI researcher. My colleagues know this 1,000 times better than me, but we're still seeing just incredible innovations in model architectures, and of course the models themselves. And all of this infrastructure is going to have to evolve and probably be written like 25 times or something to accommodate where AI is going. And anyhow, I make that parallel to the web browser because I think that's probably the sort of thing that's going to play out as like this platform is going to mature in a similar kind of way.
It's changed so much, doesn't it? I mean, I think just in the last 2 years, it looks so different. And I think CoreWeave were obviously the first to the race, and obviously they've done what they've done this year, and they've IPO'd, and they're you know some would say they're light years ahead of others. Others would argue they're catching up. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's difficult to say what it's going to look like in 2 years. Everyone's now talking a lot more around inferencing. Before everyone was just about getting GPUs, and it's GPUs, GPUs, GPUs. Now we're talking about inferencing and the next sort of evolution of it. And you're right, it's always going to be innovation. Have you got any sort of thoughts on what that innovation could be in sort of 18 months, 2 years, or is it just hard to tell?
Yeah. Certainly, our point of view at Together AI, obviously GPUs alone are not enough. And I'll say regarding your comment about CoreWeave being first, my honest perspective is, well, they weren't exactly first,
Yep.
but I had been at Vulture like 2022 in the year before ChatGPT and on a bit after that, and we were right there. I was literally in the same virtual GTC. It was funny. NVIDIA had some of us from Vulture, guys from CoreWeave, and maybe one other cloud provider. We were all doing a virtual GTC watch party as this was still COVID period of time, and there was no in-person event. So we were all in this watch party together. I was like in the chat room with the CoreWeave founders and so on. So it's funny. But I think CoreWeave, right place, right time, right capital structure. I think even more importantly, to actually raise from investors, buy incredible quantities of GPUs. But they were not the first GPU cloud. They were just the one that
Yep.
I think really went hyperscale. But our perspective now at Together AI is like, well, look, we our engineering, our researchers, we know how to use these things in a way that no other cloud provider, in our opinion, does. We can, we have the perspective of what it takes to train these models, to run the models, and that is something that informs our cluster design, the services we offer, and now one of the phenomenons that is presently unfolding is just these models. Maybe you've heard about like reinforcement learning and DeepSeek. That particular model demonstrating new techniques. Basically, part of the training process is to run inference of the models, and we think our platform is going to be, already is, particularly well suited as training requires inference, which is just a new thing that is very core to what we do here. And for more and more of our customers, particularly the ones that are, and we have different cohorts, the ones that are training models from scratch, and potentially looking at reinforcement learning, we're going to basically tighten that loop so you can train models with reinforcement learning atop our platform more economically than some of the alternatives. So anyway, for us to have this kind of continuum of services from GPU infrastructure to you know making model optimization and model shaping easier, pulling in inference where it needs to be part of those processes. So hopefully I'm explaining this well enough. But we just see synergies across this continuum, and we have certainly services that the likes of CoreWeave don't have today. So anyhow, that's what we're doing, where we see things increasingly going.
And it is booming. I mean, you're right. CoreWeave, their capital enabled them to skyrocket, right? And I think we've seen others within the NeoCloud space that have struggled because they've just not got the right investment.
Yeah.
They've not however they've done it. But we are seeing private equity, different investment coming into the space a lot more now.
Yeah.
We're seeing organizations really structure themselves in a way where they can make that investment, they can grow, they can scale. And to name a few, you got you guys, right, Together AI. We're seeing Nscale making announcements. We've seen Nebius making announcements and hitting the US pretty hard in the last sort of 9 months. So it is there. It's creating a bit of a frenzy. Of course, not everyone's going to be able to do it, but a lot more are now. So I'd imagine the hyperscalers are taking note. Do you think they're feeling threatened by it now as this alternative?
I mean, probably at least to an extent. And I haven't been in terribly close contact with some of the folks on the inside of those. So I don't necessarily know their exact mindset. Some of the people there are probably still a little bit surprised at just how this is all unfolded. They probably didn't anticipate the growth of this kind of category. And do they feel threatened? I mean, certainly, for me as a Zoogler, as people call it, an ex Google person, there's certainly a greater feeling of existential threat, not just on the cloud side, but just like the entire business. So that threat they feel that one. And then on the infrastructure side, I think it's less acute, less existential, but nonetheless not ideal.
And just like before we we're getting close to sort of finishing up now. So, I mean, you've been in the space for a long time. You've seen it change an awful lot, and we talked about it. You've worked in the larger organisations. You've got into sort of startups to scale ups. A lot of the people that we talk to, we work with, and listen, to this, they're more in the startup scale up sort of space, right? Or they're interested in learning about the NeoCloud and AI. But marketing's obviously crucial for the success to create that noise. For organisations, one that have maybe a small budget, quite frankly, what would you say is the most essential thing they get right from the beginning if they're starting from scratch?
Yeah.
Just to.
And are we talking specifically NeoCloud or more generally AI?
So AI tech NeoCloud, just sort of within that sort of space. So there are startups. We work with a couple of different incubators. These guys are. Quite frankly, CEOs that are software engineers by trade, and they maybe got 2 or 3 other people, and they're starting from scratch. So how do they get their marketing right? You talked about the name and the brand. That's great, sure. But what do they start from the beginning? And then there's a second part to that question as well.
I think for any company, if it's a cloud or otherwise, like the brand, the design, standing up the channels, the website, the social, okay, you have to do that. Certainly, there are, I myself, I'm not a designer. I have, I think reasonably decent instincts, but you have to be able to direct those efforts and identify people to help you execute, and standing up those channels and trying to find your, what is your right to win. What's your angle here? Obviously, in this NeoCloud space, it is hugely competitive, so you have to have an angle. And there are probably still opportunities in different regions and the like, and that can be a factor. So execute your fundamentals, know your angle, know what are the motions that are going to get you the customers you think you deserve, and to the extent you can use AI to accelerate, your efforts and give you and a small team superpowers, I certainly encourage using AI to expedite marketing work at this point.
So before you even get into real marketing, it's actually that clarity of thought on, who are you going after, who's your target audience, what is your message, and then it's about sort of saying,
certainly those are the fundamentals that I would say product marketing often has to start with. And whether you sort of know these things just in your gut, or you want to write them down and have debates and discussions, whatever works. But you absolutely need that clarity to be successful.
And I don't want to make it out like it's cheating, but like you say, there's AI tools that can help just sort of take away some of the grunt work. Is there any particular tools that you'd recommend that could just help somebody just get started?
Okay, so obviously Together AI, we have our, as I mentioned, Together Chat. As a consumer application, it has become quite solid. It doesn't have all the features ChatGPT does, so I therefore still use ChatGPT quite a bit. And as someone who is very frequently putting out content, blog posts, and social media and so on, I'm at this point I use Together Chat, and I use ChatGPT depending on, honestly, like the Canvas functionality and some things like that. And also as a human in AI, and that is the name of this podcast, as a human in AI who values technical understanding a great deal, I'll walk and talk with ChatGPT. I live next to Golden Gate Park here in San Francisco, and it feels like once a week or so I'm walking in Golden Gate Park and just having lengthy conversations with ChatGPT as I'm trying to understand. I was talking about ChatGPT with reinforcement learning and the infrastructure requirements for that. I was doing that over the weekend. So using AI as a teacher, particularly for those of us who are lucky to work at the center of this gold rush that is playing out, getting that technical understanding, I know I need it. I value it immensely, and AI, certainly assists in that sort of thing.
Perfect, fantastic. Well, look, this has been really, really helpful. It's been really enjoyable just to getting to know you, Ryan, and obviously what you've been doing, and sort of just your take on things. I think it's a market that's constantly evolving. AI and the GPU NVIDIA sort of ecosystem. Obviously, it's not just about NVIDIA. Again, we've heard this week, AMD are definitely mixing up a little bit as well. But look, it's just such a great space to be in, and it's exciting. So I'm just keen for me and you to keep talking. We'll see how this market keeps on evolving and what have you. And
definitely keep in touch.
We'll probably have you back.
It sounds great. Well, thanks for having me on, Nick. It's been fun.
No worries. Brilliant. See you next time. Cheers now.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I truly hope you got to take away something valuable. This episode was brought to you by Asobi. I'm the founder and managing director, and it's our goal to connect the very best talent with the most exciting scale-ups in AI, ML, and the DC space. If you're looking for more practical advice or just some inspiration from those that have been there and done it, stay with us. We're going to be releasing new episodes every week, so make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow Asobi on LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing.